In this video, I wanted to build a basic model context protocol server and client. If you're not aware of what model context protocol is, or MCP for short, you can go to modelcontextprotocol.io to learn more about it. This is basically a way to connect your AI LLM to external systems of any kind. It was created by Anthropic, but also ChatGPT uses it. At fingochat.ai/context-engineering-library, I've created a couple trains of thought that you can use in fingochat.ai to learn about MCP. If you're interested in just learning the concepts, you can come to this Learn MCP Concepts train of thought. You can either copy the text for any LLM that you use, or you can download a text file and then come to fingochat.ai, log in. I suggest downloading the desktop app. You can click this train of thought button, click import, and you can drag and drop the text file there. That will give you something like this. Then you can just ask the AI anything. Like I asked it to explain MCP to me in under 300 words. The AI then looked at the documentation and gave me a really brief, great explanation of what model context protocol is. And I might make a more conceptual video in the future, but today I wanted to actually build an MCP server and client just to visually see the code, see how it works. If you would like to follow along, you can go to fingochat.ai, sign up for free, come up over here and click the download app button. This will download the FingoChat desktop app. The reason is if you have the desktop app in the context engineering section called the train of thought, you can connect your project file tree, and you can also connect files to the train of thought so the AI knows your local code. This will be really valuable when creating the MCP server. I would like the AI to know the code that I'm working on. If you've downloaded the app, you can come up here and click this store icon to be taken to this page. Click Get Train of Thought. Click the download text file button, then come over to FingoChat, click the import button, find the file you just downloaded, click open. That will import this into your train of thought. You'll see there's some specific documentation from the modelcontextprotocol.io website, and I made sure to get the MD version of all the documentation because AI understands Markdown really well, and so I wanted to make sure to have the Markdown version. If you're not aware of how to get the Markdown version, you can come to a lot of documentation today. They'll have a copy page button that will copy the markdown of the page. You can also click this down arrow and then click on view as markdown, and it'll take you to this where there's a .md version of the page, and it will show the page in markdown. I always like to copy this as the documentation, the markdown links into FingoChat so the AI understands it better. Since Model Context Protocol is kind of new, I wanted to give it the introduction, explain the architecture, server concepts, clients concepts, versioning, how to build a server, and how to build a client. Most of the AIs out there don't know what MCP is because it's so new. But now with this in the train of thought, FingoChat will know everything about MCP, how to build a server, and how to build a client. I gave it a project introduction to saying, walk me through building an MCP server and client locally on my computer. I made sure to say I'm building everything from scratch. I just want to understand how all this works. So I just wrote a simple prompt that said, I have not created anything yet. Tell me how to create a simple MCP server that returns the name TJ. I want to create a simple app that uses the OpenAI API to call the MCP server to get the name. I want to use Node on the back end. Tell me everything to do. Okay, so it told me to run these commands to create the demo, then npm install these packages. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and run cursor dot to go ahead and open this up in Cursor. Cursor normally opens up with a chat section to the right of the screen. I just replaced the chat section with FingoChat, the desktop app. It says to create a .env file with an OpenAI key. And for this to work, you need to go to platform.openai.com to create an OpenAI key. Then it says to create this server.js file. I'm going to go ahead and create that in the root of the project. Copy this code, paste it here. Then it says to create a client.js file. I'm going to do that in the root of the project as well. I'm going to copy this code, paste that into the client.js file. Then it says to add a start script to the package.json file. I'm going to go ahead and run this to see if it actually works. And if it does, then we'll go through the code to see exactly how it works. All right. And it looks like from the terminal that the code worked. It said the final answer from the tool is TJ, which that was what I wanted it to return, was my name. Before we move on, I want to go ahead and go to the train of thought. I'm going to add these files to the train of thought. So I'm going to add the file tree. I'm going to add some of the relevant files to the file tree. Now the AI knows everything about my project. Now I'm going to say, walk me through the code in my project. Explain how it all works. And I'll say start with the client. And I'll go ahead and read through this and explain what it says to you. I just kind of want to show you this process of learning new tech. This has become the process that I follow to learn new tech. It's very hands-on. I can just put the relevant documentation in a train of thought. And basically, I tell the AI to explain this new tech to me. I'm a very visual person, so I like to see very hands-on tutorials. I don't like a lot of conceptual demos. And so this is a way for me to learn new tech quickly. What the AI is explaining is the imports that we imported. It imported OpenAI and also the Model Context Protocol SDK. There's a client-side SDK and a server-side SDK. Since we're on the client side, it imported the client side. It used the OpenAI API key that I created to create a new OpenAI instance. The next thing it created was this tools to descriptions. This was a helper that would convert MCP tool objects into a simple description for the model. So what it returns here is a tools array with the name of the tool, the title of the tool, and the description and input schema. And before moving past this part, I would ask it something like, what are tools? And the AI explains what tools are. Tools are a thing in MCP that are executable functions that an MCP server exposes to an MCP client. They let your AI application perform actions outside the model, like reading files, querying a database, or calling an API. And so in our MPC server, you can see a server tool that was created called getName. It gives it a description of return the name TJ. This helps the AI know when you would call this function. So this return the name TJ description lets the AI know, hey, if the user ever asks what your name is, return the name TJ. It left out an input schema, so there's no input schema. And the content that is returned is type text with the text TJ, which is an object within an array, which is the value of content. I went ahead and read through the rest of this. I'll go ahead and just explain the rest of it to you. The main function that's run in the client.js file is this run function. The way this works is at the beginning of the function, you'll notice it creates a new client. This client is part of the Model Context Protocol SDK, and it also creates a transport using the Studio Client Transport, which is another Model Context Protocol package. This Studio Client Transport will be looking for one or more server script paths, which at the bottom of this function that was created, you'll notice that the server script was ./server.js, which is the server file that we just created. So that is being passed into the run function. The first thing that the function does is it awaits a client connection. So it wants to make sure that it's connected to this server.js file that we created. And you'll notice the imports in the server.js file are really similar to the client ones, with the only difference being instead of client, it's saying server. So MCP server, Studio server transport. They're still from the Model Context Protocol SDK. The server instance is created this way using MCP server. And in the main function, a transport is made using the Studio server transport function. And on the server, it awaits the server connection that was created earlier to connect to the transport. Back on the client side, after awaiting a client connection to the server, it's looking up a list of tools on the server. If you go back to the server, the way you can know what the tools are is it uses this server.tool function. Whenever you write server.tool, give it a name, a description, and a return value, this will become one of the tools listed as one of the available tools from MCP server. And if you look in the terminal for the value of available tools from MCP server, it's an array and it got the singular tool get name. Now let's say we wanted to have another tool called, say, get age. You could come down here and say server.tool to be creating another tool. And so I'm going to go ahead and name this get age. Give it a description of return the age of TJ. I'm not putting in a schema, and I'll return another text type. And now if I run this again, the value for available tools should be 2 arguments. So I'm going to run npm start. And as you can see, it returned there's 2 different tools, a get name tool and a get age tool. It puts that together as a tool's description, which runs this function we saw earlier. It gets all the tools, returns a map of the tools in JSON format with a name, a title, a description, and input schema. We're just returning a name and description. And let me just verify that. I'm going to console log tool description to make sure that's what it looks like. So let's run this again, npm start. All right, and so you can see it's using the same name for the name and the title. And the second values we're putting into the server.tools is being used as the description. And before we move on, I actually want to come up here and say console log the tools so we can see what do the tool results look like from the server. So let's run that again. And so here are what the tools look like from the server. The first value was the name, get name, description, and then there's an input schema. It says the type, properties, whether or not there's additional properties, and the schema. And so that's what the value of tools looks like. Next, if you've used an AI API before, you're probably used to seeing a system prompt. This is like a description of the AI identity, basically. It's saying you're a tool decider, given the list of available tools. If the user asks for a name, respond with a single JSON object. It just gives some examples of what to do. And then it makes sure to list the available tools. Here's where the call is being made to the AI. The user prompt says, please get me the name. It's putting that in the messages array as the user prompt. The system prompt is the system prompt right here that we saw earlier. Whatever OpenAI responds with would be considered the assistant prompt. And just to see what that looks like, I'll put a console log here and we'll run this again in just a moment. Next, it gets the assistant text that is returned. There's some code to parse the text. After that, it checks if it should call a tool or not. OpenAI will return whether or not it should call a tool, true or false. And it will also look up if there's a name for the call tool. And so before we move on, let's go ahead and run this again so we can see exactly what this looks like. Okay, so here is a chat response from OpenAI. It gives it an ID, an object of chat completion. It says which model was used. It gives a choices array, which is where the message content is located. And so before we move on, if you look inside of the response, there was a choices with an array. And in the first value, the first object has a message. And within message, there is content. This is the value of assistant text. And this is what the assistant raw response looks like. So you'll notice the content, instead of returning an answer to the question where it says, please give me the name, instead of giving an answer, what OpenAI did was it returned this value, call tool, and then it gave it a name of get name, meaning it says, instead of responding, use a tool, get name, which you'll need to know how to respond correctly. And so it checked for that. It said there is a call tool value in the parsed assistant text, and then the parsed call tool name is get name. And so that's what the tool name is. It's saying you need to run the get name tool, and you need to check for arguments if there's any arguments, which our tools don't use arguments. And so that gets us to this next part, model requested tool call, which it said in the terminal get name. So it goes ahead and it calls the client we created. It says to call this tool, the tool with the name get name with these args, which is an empty object. And that gets us to our returned content, which is type text TJ. Before we move on, I just want to show how this will change. If instead of saying, please get me the name, you could say, please get me the age. And let's run that and see if that works. And so as you could see, for the assistant raw response, instead of saying get name, it says get age, and it returned the value of 35. That's what gets us to this final answer from Tool. And now let's see what would happen if we ask an unrelated question. I'll switch the user prompt to what is today's date? Something like that. We'll run this script. As you can see, the assistant raw response for this was a call tool of null. And so this value here would be null and would be skipped for that kind of question. And instead would go to this response. Model did not request tool call and give the explanation. And the reason why it gave an explanation was in the system prompt, it said if no tool call is needed, return this with a short explanation. So the explanation the AI gave was the request is for today's date, which does not require a tool call. And so those are the basics of how MCP works. I know that was super basic, but hopefully that made sense. If you'd like to try out learning with the FingoChat AI, you can go to fingochat.ai/context engineering library, get the build an MCP server and client train of thought. Once you download the desktop app for free, just import that train of thought here, and you can go through the same exact process that I went through. This is a much more pleasant way for me personally to learn tech. It's like I have a personal tutor right there alongside with me, answering any questions I have along the way about how things work. And if you'd like to contribute to the FingoChat context engineering library, maybe you'd like to help others learn a new tech, you can come to this page and click add a train of thought to the library. You can add your own FingoChat train of thought. So if you download FingoChat and, for example, you create a new train of thought, maybe you want to create something like a Firebase intro tutorial, you could organize your thoughts in the train of thought. Then you can export the train of thought, come back, click on this store library looking icon to be taken here and add the train of thought to the library. You could also follow the same exact process that I went through to create YouTube tutorial videos that are much easier to follow along with. Let us know what you think about MCP in the comments below. Do you love this new process? And I like how it's sort of already becoming a default for AI models, with OpenAI adopting this as well. But let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think it's a simple process? Do you think it's kind of complicated? Do you think it's really going to catch on? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon if you'd like to see more content like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.